Where are we? Because it's flipping.
Last session of the day. Are y'all ready? Y'all still awake? Yeah. All right. We have our presentation today on You Can Do This, Resolving Statewide Agreed Upon Procedure Exceptions. We have two instructors today for that. We have Miss Diane Allison, who you just met a little while ago, and new to our stage is Mr. Barry Kelly. Barry began working with the Auditor's Office in 2012. Currently, he works on the Special Projects team in the Local Government Services section of the LLA. He helps prepare statewide agreed-upon procedures, updates, creates and monitors the implementation of statutory required schedules, fulfills legislative requests, and provides assistance to local officials and CPAs. He's a certified internal auditor and a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors. He has a degree in accounting and a master's in business administration. And prior to working with LLA, he worked as a tax auditor for the state of Louisiana. Please welcome Ms. Diane Allison and Mr. Barry Kelly.
All right, we're glad to be with you for this afternoon. Look, we're going to talk about statewide AUPs, which are internal controls. We promise to get you out by 4:30. It is my honor to be able to co-present with Barry because Barry has done these procedures. He's been in governments and he knows a whole lot about this stuff. And then with his CIA and his knowledge of internal controls, just watch all the great things you're going to learn. Now, preliminary comment is that the statewide agreed upon procedures are no secret. They are on our website. They've been on our website for since 2017. So you can go get them, and what we're going to do is go through these and then give you a whole lot of explanations about this. So the way we designed this presentation, and I'm just going to say this was Barry's idea, okay? First, he said, and Barry's a daddy of two little boys. So first we're going to go through the exact procedures, right, and what they all say. But Barry, you could tell the daddy, right? Why? Why do we have to do those procedures? It's not because I said so. We have really, really good reasons to tell you why that we have to do those. And this is about resolving them. So I don't know how many of us get everything 100% perfect all the time in our governments. That really is the goal for this, but sometimes we don't. And little things slip by. And from the CIA perspective, what we think we may be doing it right, but we're not. So that's what, these are helpful tips for resolving those exceptions. And then for the ones who say, yeah, I already get it right, but what can I do to improve? How can I do better? That's what we call next level. So you will see these little things on the slides, and that's just going to cue you into what we're going to say. So the first thing is why? Why are they necessary? Now, the big thing, we've talked about this. We had our fraud session this morning at 8 in the morning, and Greg talked a lot about fraud, and questions came up. Basically, where was the auditor? So what I'm going to say in defense of my auditor friends is they are engaged to do a financial statement audit. And what are they engaged specifically to do? Are the financial statements fairly presented in all material respects? The numbers that you say, are they the right numbers in all material respects? That's what they're engaged to do. To do a fraud audit, like the kind Greg talked about this morning, that's a very different audit. That's very, very different procedures. So that's why auditors don't find fraud. The other thing that we've had conversations about with auditors can't look at every single transaction. So they sample, okay? That's what they do. And how do they sample? Like, that's what we all want to know. I knew I wanted to know that a lot when I was an auditee. They do it based on risk. Now, they're going to have their own ideas for risk, and we're not going to tell you how they develop those in this session because we don't have time, but they're going to sample based on risk. Risk can be volume, and it can also be the complexity of a transaction. Okay, and it can be plenty other things as well. So they can't look at every single transaction. And so what statewide AUPs, and let me tell you, AUP, agreed upon procedure. Now that's just auditor lingo for that's how it is in auditing standards, okay? So when we say agreed upon procedures, they have to go look at that section of the auditing standards, and that's what they have to follow for that. So that's what that means. It's just a fancy way, and sorry I can't change the language. So that's what it is. But this requires them to take a more careful look at what areas, the areas Greg talked about this morning, right? The areas where the fraud happens. Okay, this is what I just learned about a month ago. What's the objective of statewide AUPs? I never saw this until about a month ago. And the objective is to help our local governments correct internal controls. So Barry knows all about how internal controls ought to be. I may not be doing them that way. And I'm going to tell you, look, full confession, I did not have a contracting policy before statewide AUPs came out where I worked. I didn't have one. I didn't know about it. That is an improper internal control. He's going to tell us why, right? So now they came out, they helped me to make that correction, and it's corrected. It's not like because I said so. It's not because this is good for you. It's just to help you correct things. Why? To reduce your chance of fraud, waste, and abuse in the future. So that it's not Greg who comes knocking at your door saying, we're here to investigate. That's really why they're necessary. The other thing about why Barry and I really, really want you to resolve them is because they can turn into really, really big problems, right? So a little statewide agreed upon procedure exception. All right, Diane, you didn't have a contracting policy. Now I'm like, that's minor because that's the one exception I had. Everything else was good, right? So I think I'm doing well. I'm not doing well, okay? So I think that's minor, but you know what that's gonna go to? A management letter comment. Because you agreed to hire somebody for professional services and you had no contract. That's they're going to say, like, I recommend, like I'm just warning you, you need to get a policy. You need to have a policy that says when you need contracts. And should I not do that? And I don't need a policy. I don't need a policy. Guess what's going to happen? I'm going to have a finding. It's just a matter of time before I have a finding. And those get progressively worse. So should you not want a finding that has all kind of serious implications for you, just solve them when they're little bitty things. When you get that little bitty rock in your shoe, just take it out. Just fix it. And it won't grow into infecting your foot and causing you to have pain, right? It's not going to get there. Just fix it right away. So that's what we want you to do. So statewide agreed upon procedures, and in your handouts, this is actually a link to the procedures that you can have. And I want to give kudos to Barry. He worked on this document and he changed it all up. The table of contents got a table of contents now, and then the table of contents is all linked so you can go click and go right to the thing, which I do all. This is my copy. Like they're dog-eared. They're dog-eared all the time because I use them up so bad and then I have to go print another one, but keep all my notes for it. So that's the link to those, and they address these 14 areas of agreed upon procedures. And here's the thing, should you all want to stay till the very end, we're going to tell you about the future of those procedures. So let's get started on these great big gigantic areas. So what we're going to do, as you saw, number one is written policies and procedures. Instead of going over them like at this time, we're going to go over them as we go over the procedure for you, okay? And so the one policy that we don't have a procedure on yet is what Jennifer just talked about with the Local Government Budget Act. And we hit on it a little bit right before lunch on those financial policies, right? So what should the policy be, the written policies, procedures on a budget? So the legislative auditor says that it should address your written procedures, preparing, adopting, monitoring, and amending the budget. And there's your reference to the Local Government Budget Act. Click on there. There you go to your link. So that's what we want it to address. So in your organization, how does that happen? So a high-level summary of the Local Government Budget Act is the best thing that you can do is have, and I know there are all kind of laws and different changes. The best thing that you can do, best practice, adopt your budget before the fiscal year starts, instead of when the fiscal year is underway. Now, I know school districts can wait till September 15th to adopt, and there are reasons for that, but their fiscal year starts in July. So you need to adopt a budget. That's a best practice before that. So the thing is, present your budget in month 11. That's your current fiscal year. They adopt in month 12. That's your current fiscal year. And month 1, you implement the budget in the year that you're doing for budget. And then Jennifer talked about it needs to be available for public inspection. And that's a whole lot of big theme on our conference, right? Transparency, it's the public's money. They have to have input in that. You have to have that hearing to get the input for that. And then you have to publish the notice of that hearing, right, in the paper. You got 10 days, you have 15 days. Pay attention to that. There is, in the Local Government Budget Act, it has to be in proper form. And what does that mean? There's a budget message that needs to accompany it, and it's got to have required elements in there. What are the column headings for this budget that you're doing with all these numbers? You can't have one column called, this is the proposed budget. No, the law says you have to have a lot of other columns, and it's basically to compare, how do you think this year is going to end, and what are we doing next year, and to look at those variances, right? We have a template. Look, we're here to help, right? We've got a template that our team has developed. It's on our website, and you can go pull it, and it's got the column headings. And then you also have to publish that notice of completion. And then we were talking about monitoring the budget. He's going to tell us a whole lot of how to do that, right? But we have to monitor that budget, notify the board in writing when you have a variance of at least 5%. You've got to notify the board. Why? That's a trigger. We need to take action. We need to take action. We need to go in a different direction, and that gives them the chance to amend that budget. Okay, so at a high level, how do we do the budget? This is for those of you who are new to government, who are like, I came from the for-profit world, we didn't have budgets. Okay, so first thing you're going to do is you're going to develop that timeline, and you're going to work backwards from your adoption date and your 10 days and your 15 days and your board meeting dates and your deadlines that you need to get stuff in the paper by and all that. You're going to develop that timeline. Then you're going to start with what we call budget worksheets. It can be those columns that are required down there with the current year and all of that stuff and budget, but you're going to develop those and give them to departments and get them to give their input on what they want for there. You're going to enter all that in the big budget spreadsheet, and what happens at that point? Expenditures exceed revenues, okay? I'm also going to look and estimate my revenues. I know we have some assessors here, and one of my favorite go-to guys was my assessor to say, what's happening with property values? What's going on? Help me to get revenues. And then we're going to put it in there. Now, to all of our boards and that we've been talking about the whole conference, right? You have to decide when your expenditures exceed your revenues, you need to make some hard choices. So you need to have your vision and your goals, and you need to talk about this. And don't get stuck. Get it resolved. Get it resolved. Give and take. Work through all of that. It takes a lot of collaboration, but it's best for your citizens. It's best for your community to do that. Once you get your numbers right, then it's easy. Here are the things that need to be in the budget message, and then you schedule. After that, you're good to go. And look at the things in your budget message. You really kind of get to, stretch your stuff and talk about the good things that you're doing. You get to talk about the most important features in there. You get to talk, you can talk about your summary description of the plan. You get to talk about, like, what are your hopes and dreams for your community? Why did you put so much under streets this year? You didn't have that much under streets last year. Well, because your streets need a lot of repairing, and we don't want to wait any longer. We decided that's a priority this year. That's what we're going to do. So you're going to say those things. And then you're just going to put the wheels in motion. You're going to schedule the date of that hearing. You're going to publish the notice in the paper. You're going to have your hearing. You're going to adopt the budget at a open meeting, right, for all. You're going to take public comment for that, and then when you're finished, you're going to publish notice that that was completed. So that's basically the budget in a nutshell for you to do. And now Barry's going to take that just one step further and tell you how to be even better.
All right, so can you guys hear me? You have a question?
Tell her about the questions.
I'm sorry. We do have some spaces that we have set aside for our questions. So after we do a few of these, then we'll take questions on those.
Yeah, I forgot to say that. Write your questions down, and
Okay.
we'll take them.
So now we're going to talk about the board or finance committee procedure. Now, important to note, if you are an entity that is managed by a single elected official, such as an assessor or a sheriff, this procedure will not apply to you. The board, for everybody else, the board should meet with a quorum as frequently as required by its charter, bylaws, or enabling legislation. As Jennifer told you, you cannot do the business of your organization if you do not have a quorum. management should provide to the board monthly budget to actual comparisons for the general fund, quarterly budget to actual comparisons for the proprietary fund. And you learned yesterday that the proprietary fund consists of your enterprise fund and your internal service funds. And semi-annual budget to actual comparisons at a minimum for all special revenue funds, which would consist of things like your grants. If the general fund has a negative ending, had a negative ending unassigned fund balance in the prior year, then you should have come up with a plan to eliminate that negative fund balance. And your auditor will be looking to see that there is a plan. At each meeting, this is new. Number 4 is new for this year, so pay close attention to this one. At each meeting, the board should receive written updates on the progress made in resolving audit findings from the prior year. This was put in place to ensure that though you may have had a management corrective action plan created, it's trying to make sure that you're actually following through and trying to resolve those audit findings. Why are these important? They are important because the board plays an important role in providing oversight for your entity. They cannot make informed decisions if they do not have that, as Mike said, that vital information. And so when we look at the vital information, it needs to be accurate and timely. Otherwise, the board may end up making decisions that are based on outdated or incomplete information. So these are some tips for resolving exceptions that you may have. Those tips include annually pre-scheduling all of your meetings for the next calendar year. Now, you still need to make sure that you're following the open meetings laws, and you need to make sure that these meetings are scheduled with the frequency that is required by your charter, your bylaws, or your enabling legislation. But if you schedule it in advance and send a meeting invite out to your board members, now they can plan their business and personal affairs around your meeting, and hopefully that will decrease the chances that you lack a quorum when you have meetings going forward. Also, make sure that you prepare your board meetings for every meeting. And a suggestion would be to write them up within 24 hours of the meeting so that everything is written while your mind is fresh. And that's very important for this procedure in particular, because when your auditor comes to test these items, they're going to primarily be looking at your board meeting minutes in order to ensure that these things were done. Also, make sure that you're providing the board with, the management is providing the board with those budget to actual comparisons as we previously stated. If applicable, develop that plan to get rid of that negative unassigned fund balance. Also, make sure that management is providing the board with those updates as to the resolution of those audit findings. Again, you're comparing that progress to management's corrective action plan. So you've created, when you get an audit, you create your management actions plan, and you need to abide by that. You need to put, it's not just enough to create the action plan, you have to work at trying to resolve the finding. Taking it to the next level. If you're doing everything right now, and you don't have any exceptions, what can you do to further improve your operations? So one thing that you can do is consider using board management software. Board management software is pretty cool. I just found out about it preparing for this presentation, and it's pretty cool. Some of them will allow you to put together all of your agenda. It will record your minutes. It will store all of your important documents, including your bylaws, your charter. It will you can keep all of your minutes and everything organized in one place. You also can use it to provide public access to the public. So the public can access video, all of the important documents by going to your website, and that adds a level of transparency and user friendliness to those people who are busy, and it encourages involvement by the community. It also it can take, and you can disseminate information to your board members as necessary. Management should also provide to the board a list of investments at least twice a year. Now, the reason we say this is because your board needs to know where the money is. invested. And they want to make sure that the money is invested in line with the strategy of the overall organization and its goals. Management should also provide the board with a schedule of debt payments and bank accounts so that they know what their obligations are and that they are actually following through with those obligations, financial obligations, and paying their debt, because that is a commitment that they must follow through with.
All right, so let's go on to bank reconciliations. This is kind of near and dear to our hearts, given the news of the last couple of weeks where a bank actually failed, and some people are left out of money. So for bank reconciliations, the statewide agreed upon procedures say, and I want you to circle this in red, bank statement reconciliation should be prepared for every bank account. So how does the board know if that's happening? That's why back here, Barry said a good idea is at least once a year, give them a list of all those bank accounts. Now, you're not giving them account numbers. You're going to tell them, here's the title of the bank, it's the payroll account. It's at ABC Bank, and here's the purpose of it to have. That's what you're giving them so that they can know, because it's a good idea to have a policy that says we need the minimum number of bank accounts. Because why? Of this agreed upon procedure, every bank statement needs to be reconciled every month. No exceptions, no exceptions, okay? Greg didn't get to tell you all the fraud stories, but some of them are accounts that don't get a lot of activity. That's where fraudsters go to steal. So it may not be the operating account. It may be some other account that's set up. And this says 2 months. The statewide agreed upon procedure, please note, very liberal, because I think I'm about to change that. 2 months, right, within the closing date. And why are we doing that? We're being nice because people are very busy and people wear multiple hats. And for some people, reconciling a bank statement is a bear. It can take 3 or 4 days. We're going to help you with that. The other procedure, continuing in the procedure, it says that there needs to be written evidence of review. Okay, so somebody has to review the bank rec. Now, it can't be just anybody. A member of management that doesn't handle the cash, post, or issue checks. Okay, that's because of to have proper segregation of duties. So somebody else needs to review that bank rec. Now, I can tell you this, the somebody else can be somebody in another department, but teach them what to look for. And make sure that the packet that comes with that bank rec has all of the information so they can go see. Where you say total checks, here it is, total checks on this report right here. So teach them the kinds of things to look for. Now, written evidence, we need a name and we need a date. Now, should you be or signed electronically, I'm good with that. I actually really like that because I can read it. Because should you be like my husband, whose name is William G. Allison, and signs his name when he was working, many, many times throughout the day, he developed the squiggle. And I'm like, dude, I don't like the squiggle. And he says, I don't like writing William G. Allison like more than 4 or 5 times in a day. So deal with the squiggle. But this way you can read it. So it needs to be, if somebody has a squiggle, then you need a key that shows squiggle is William G. Allison, okay? Because the auditor will come and ask whose signature is that, and the answer should not be, I don't know. And really tough auditors are going to say, whose signature is that? And they're going to say William G. Allison, and they're going to go hunt the man down and ask him what it was that he was signing and what he was approving for that. Okay, and then we need to research old reconciling items. So my auditor friends who are listening will tell you this: we just can't stand old stuff 12 months or late. They really don't like that. They question that. Is it happening? What's going on with that? So why do we have? And here is the disconnect between our AUP and the law. So law number 1, click on there, it opens up to the law, says you have 30 days to examine your bank statements, 30 days. This helps the bank. So if I'm not doing it until 45 days, right, then can I go back and have recourse if a $1,000 check cleared my bank account that wasn't mine? No. I only have 30 days to contest with my bank. Therein lies the disconnect. So that's one of the reasons why that you have to go look for that. And then the other thing about the research the old outstanding items is unclaimed property. There's an unclaimed property law. It's all called unclaimed property. Like, dude, we wrote you a check. Why didn't you cash it? Don't know. There's a myriad of reasons for that. But there's a law that says you have to send that money to the state treasurer. Okay, so those are two laws. So that's really why. The other one that, we don't want to put on a slide is basically like bank reconciliations, like stop fraudsters. They have to happen all of the time. So our tips for resolving them, same thing that Barry said, the almighty calendar. So should you have people in your office who are not organized, you schedule it on the calendar. 5th of every month, reconcile the bank statement, put it on their calendar, invite them to a meeting, okay, and make it that way for everybody, whatever you do. Now, to those, my son Timothy, he's a nurse. Okay, so he's like, Mom, what is a bank rec? Because the poor soul had the unfortunate experience of being raised by a CPA. Mom, what is a bank rec? And I said, son, that's where you look for your old outstanding checks. Here's the requirement. Here's the formula for reconciling your bank statement. There are banks that just kind of have that. So basically you take that bank balance on your bank statement and you add back in deposits that didn't clear the bank statement yet. And then you subtract out checks that didn't clear the bank statement yet. And that would be your GL balance, right? That's your general ledger balance. That should be the reconciled balance for that. Let's talk about those deposits that didn't clear the bank. Here's the rule. It can't be the deposit that on your book says was the 16th of the month. Why? Because it should have cleared like the 17th or the 18th. It should be cleared by the 31st of the month. No ifs, ands, or buts. So that's usually stuff that's dated like the 30th, the 31st, okay? And I'm going to be a little nice if that happens to fall on the weekend, okay? It might go. But that's all it is. So don't let somebody tell you that a bank deposit dated the 16th in your books didn't clear the bank. That didn't happen. Something's up with that. Document who prepared the bank rec. So who prepared it and who reviewed it. So you put Diane Allison, I prepared it on March 6th. Barry Kelly, he reviewed it on March 8th. Okay, so that's what you put. Who prepared it and who reviewed it and the date for that. And then work to resolve those old outstanding items. Don't let them go till 12 months. Just don't do that. It's really too hard and it's too stressful. I'm trying to reduce the stress in your life. Okay, so what you want to do is work on those every month. So you look at those old outstanding items, and what you do is you say at about 4 months, you're like, dude, let's start looking at these things. Why haven't these people cleared? Because your memory's still good, okay, about that. And, maybe that vendor changed a mailing address. Who knows why, okay? But start researching. Make phone calls. Oh, I don't know. It's in my purse, okay? Because I get that. I'm not as good as I used to be on depositing checks. Anyway, it's in my purse. I will go deposit it. Okay. I had one employee who I fussed at real bad because she would not cash her paychecks. I'm like, why are you working? I work because I need my paycheck. But she did not need her paycheck. And she said, Diane, I'm saving up to put a new roof on my house. I said, let me tell you how to save up for a new roof. Put the check in your savings account. But I don't want all these old outstanding checks on my bank rack. So she said, yes, ma'am, and she got it done. Okay? So another thing to help you with this is go look at your bank accounts, because I've had to do this in my career, and close those old ones that are inactive. Like, who knows why? You've lost the history. Like, just move the money somewhere and close it, okay? Less headaches, less work, less stress. That's what we all need. Another thing that auditors will love, so auditors, mark this down, I'm saying something nice. They want you to reconcile in the accounting software. So in the accounting software, a lot of accounting software has a bank rec module. You can upload your bank statement into your banking software, and guess what it does? It's going to go match and for the things that cleared the bank. Pretty cool. Look, Ma, no hands. Okay? That's what that is. And they want you to do that. Another thing, taking it to the next level, definitely reconcile your bank statement, not 2 months like that statewide AUP says, and not even 30 days like the law says. Do it before you do your financial statements, because you're going to miss stuff, okay? What we were famous for missing is grants, because grants get deposited electronically. It's like, dude, this is manna from heaven. Where's this money come from? Well, some poor accountant soul had to go figure out what that money is and whose grant is this, and let's get it recorded, right? So that helps your financial statements and for things. And weird stuff that's happening that you don't know it's happening or that you forgot about for those kind of things. Better yet, with all those doggone outstanding checks, look to pay your vendors electronically. It will save you so much time when you pay them electronically. Okay, you don't have to go list at what checks cleared and what checks are still outstanding. You don't have to go research old outstanding things. You just get their banking information. We have got a best practice on our website when a supposed vendor says, look, I want to change my banking information. Because from Les's talk this morning, and he told you about how you get your emails hacked by somebody, we've got a best practice for that dog don't hunt. Fill out our form, and we're going to verify all that stuff before we do it, including your firstborn and where he happens to be right at this moment. Okay, so that's what that's all about. Use positive pay. So look, I don't work for a bank. I don't get paid by a bank, but I'm just telling you, here's what that is. When you write a batch of checks, okay, you send a file to the bank that says this check number, this check date, this dollar amount, this vendor. This bank is what you're authorized to pay and nothing else. Okay, that's positive pay. So when something weird comes across where they want to withdraw that's not on the list, the bank says, not going to happen. And the bank can send you and say, and you get an email that says, you want us to pay this? And the answer would be, no, don't pay that. But sometimes it could be yes, because maybe something got misread. That way your bank is only authorized and they know the checks that you've written. So they can tell when a check's been altered, when a dollar amount's been altered. For a while there, fraudsters were taking checks out of mailboxes and stuff like that and altering them, okay? Don't let that happen. Use positive pay. You will sleep easier at night for that. And then use a reconciliation. Some organizations do supply. I'm a bookkeeper for one organization on the side in my spare time. I told you I really like accounting, so what do I do as a hobby? Accounting, that's what I do for a hobby on the weekends. So, and I have this one client, and we give them every month the bank rec. And we show it to them. But we've written it in a way, not that formula I told you, because they don't get that, okay? So, not all people get that, right? So we write it in a way that they understand. Here's the major money we got, and here's how many checks we wrote, and how many were paid by draft, and stuff like that. Here's the amount of our payroll, our net payroll, and our taxes, just to show. So you can consider doing that if they like it. And let's talk about the last thing, collateralization, because that is a big deal, okay? So there is a law, and we'll find it for you if you need it, that says your deposits have to be collateralized because it's public funds. So there's a federal law that says the first $250,000 in your bank account is insured by the federal government, FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corp, okay? They will insure that should your bank go under, like Silicon Valley Bank. But if you have $1 million in your bank account at Silicon Valley Bank and you don't have collateral, dude, you're out $750,000. That's gone. Public money. So we have a law that says not going to happen in our Louisiana governments, has to be collateralized. So what is collateral? Collateral is what a bank has to put up. So when they have my $1 million from my government, they have to go buy financial securities, financial investments, treasury notes, I don't care. They're going to go buy stuff, right, that's worth $750,000. They're going to give me a list of what that is every single month. And I'm going to look at that and look at my bank deposit. I'm going to say everything's cool. If they gave me a list that totaled $600,000 and I have $1 million in the bank, everything is not cool. So this is a way for you to check and make sure every single month that your bank has the right collateral for you. And if it doesn't, you call them and you tell them that. Okay, so check that. And then the Silicon Valley Bank, if you banked at Silicon Valley Bank, you're going to be fine. Because what are they going to do when they go under? They're going to take those securities, and look, it's a QSIB number, dude. Like that one right there, specific treasury note, that's for this local government right here. Okay, so they're going to go sell that and give you local government back your money. And you will promptly find another bank. So that's why that's there, to protect the public funds. Okay, collections, this is another area. Greg did a great intro to this on collections. So, and this is where you really need proper segregation of duties. You need to go slow. You need to think about things, and you need to expand your mind, okay, for this. So what do our procedures say? Our written policies and procedures say they have to address receiving, recording, and preparing deposits. 3 different things: receiving, recording, and preparing deposits. Then we need to look at management's actions to make sure about the completeness of revenue. And what does that mean? In simple words, that means all the money went to the bank. None of the money didn't make it to the bank. It all went to the bank, okay? For that. That's what it is, no matter what it is. So this can be, oftentimes it can be a printout of a cash register report. It can be receipts that are issued. It can be number of tickets sold if you're doing admissions or something like that. It can be any one of those things. But management has to have a way to determine that of the completeness of the revenues. And then your receipts need to be pre-numbered sequentially. Why? Because a receipt can be, somebody can issue a receipt that's not pre-numbered, and the collector of the money can then pocket the cash. Don't want that. We want to issue a receipt for everything, and we need them numbered. We need to account for them, including voids, okay, and including, and then you have ones that get damaged if you're like me and you drink coffee. Okay, at your desk. But we all have sippy cups now with the tops on them, so hopefully we're not spilling anymore. Okay, there's a lot of things that need to balance when you're doing this, and I'm really talking a lot about the ones that collect money for utilities, because this is where this goes, right? So the receipts need to agree with the report, the software report, and any other documentation that you have. That needs to agree with the deposit slip. So all of your receipts that you add up need to total to the deposit slip, right? That's not enough. Okay, the deposit slip needs to total to the bank statement. And the bank statement needs to go with the debit to the cash in your general ledger. Okay, all of those things need to tie. And look, when you do it like that and you upload that bank statement, your software can easily find all of those deposits like that. Okay, so that's just one way to make sure everything is nice and neat, everything totals till it balances for that. You have to have the proper segregation of duties and collections. So what do our minimum segregation of duties say? Employees responsible for cash shouldn't share cash drawers. 1 cash drawer to each person. Okay, don't share cash drawers. The legislative auditor said don't share cash drawers under any circumstances. Get your own. The other thing is that employees who collect cash, they shouldn't prepare and make deposits, bank deposits, okay? Now, I know we have some small places, so we have a unless somebody else reconciles that documentation, okay? So sometimes that will happen in smaller organizations. Employees who collect cash shouldn't also post. So the duties that you need to segregate: custody, authorization, reporting, and reconciling. And that's really what we're getting to here, to segregate all of those things out. So the one who collects cash should not post the entries or reconcile the collections unless you have another set of eyes on it. Okay, so the more set, at least 2 eyes on every transaction. That's what you want. You definitely want all your employees to be bonded or insured. Why? A theme of the day: public funds, not our money. All right, so that way we have insurance in case theft happens and stuff like that. And then deposits need to be made within 1 business day. So the law says 1 business day wherever reasonable, I think is the word, but it may not be. But so what we decide, wherever practicable is the word, right? So what we have decided, Barry worked on this, you can thank him later, within 1 week. So in our rural areas, and some of our schools I know are located in rural areas, within 1 week, if the bank's more than 10 miles away, or the deposit is less than 100, and it's stored securely. Okay, so that's what we figured is wherever practicable as defined for that. Why do we have to have that? Easy. This is, cash has a high risk of walking, more so than checks who need to be physically altered and stuff like that, right? And so we want the proper segregation of duties. We want at least 2 eyes. What's the rule? The rule is you don't want somebody to be in a position to both perpetuate a fraud and conceal it. That's why you need 2 eyes. Greg talked this morning about how cash larceny is the most common fraud that happens. presence of anti-fraud controls, like these strong internal controls, like some strong policies that we talked about, like the fraud hotline and all these other things. They're all anti-fraud controls. That is associated with lower fraud losses and quicker detection. And that's why. And you want to make sure that the government and all its revenues make it to where it needs to go, so that you can provide the services to the folks that you serve and keep your money securely in a safe. So how are we going to do this? The thing about the segregation of duties, it's a good idea to shift those job duties around and make sure multiple people are trained. That enables people to go on vacation and feel like stuff is going to be done right while they're gone. It's also good for cross-training and to get that segregation of duties, that one cash drawer. Have a list of your insurance policies and when they expire. Make sure you have no lapse of coverage. And should you have way too much on your plate, then you delegate that to your insurance agent and you tell them, like, dude, about 3 months before the policy expires, like, we need to start talking about this stuff, okay, to get that going. So make sure that you know when those things are going to happen and get your adequate deposit documentation. This is where written procedures are really good. What exactly should the documentation be for those types of deposits? Close your cash drawers at the end of every business day. Don't let it go longer. And look, don't do it at lunchtime. Makes no sense. Don't do it at 2 o'clock when it's kind of slow and you have a few minutes because you don't want to stay late. No, do it at the end of every business day. Get in the habit of making your deposits daily. Just get in the habit of doing it. Okay? Don't let it lapse. And then make sure that everything totals. So Barry and I really like software. Can you tell? We really like software. Why do we like software? It makes things, like Andre said, efficient, effective, accurate, fast, all of that stuff. So we're going to recommend that all the time. Software, cash registers, squares and all that have to have proper internal controls. Remote deposit terminal, I don't know if you know what that is, but that's a machine you put on your desk. You get software, you log into your bank, and it reads the checks, okay, for you, so you do not have to take the checks to the bank. You can do it remotely for that. That's a great thing to do. Drafting customers' accounts, if you have utilities, talk to your banker about, dude, we want to start drafting their accounts. That way they don't have to bring cash into our office and all that stuff. That way our utilities get paid on time and everybody's happy. How do we do that? Go talk with them about that. Online payment portal, same kind of thing to enable them to do that. And getting your money daily, another thing that you can do, because I come from a school district and we had football games on Friday nights, get everything ready. Use those disposable bags, key to night depository, and go take it to the bank for that. So that's how you get it there. So now we are going to pause for those who have questions on, don't get ahead of us. Don't ask us about policy 9. We're on 4. We're on 4 procedures. So does anybody have any questions? Michelle.
So I have a question. You said don't do your deposit as much or at 2 because it's slow because employees don't want to stay late. How do you shift the mindset from that to doing it at the end of the day where you can account for a full day's business like it should be? Because I have clients that it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon every day and we run into issues with timing because credit cards close at midnight. So all of the credit cards are posted that day, but in the system, I have to manually track those after they close the register until they close the register the next day.
All right, so the question is, how do we shift the mindset instead of doing it in the middle of the day to some other time? You just have a written procedure and you just figure out your time. So your policy at your organization may be we accept payments up to 3 o'clock. That's the end of the day. So don't come in here at 4:30. Nope. That we don't accept payments after 3 o'clock. So when so-and-so walks in, my husband's a retiree. He likes to go pay things in person. Like he has nothing to do. And I tell him that and I try to give him things to do. Okay? So no, don't go do that. This is what you need to do. You need to take it the next day. So you can get them, you can just do with policies and procedures, get them to have it that way so that you stop accepting payment at this so you can close your drawer, balance your drawer, reconcile everything, get it ready for the bank, and your employees can leave on time at 4:30. We have any other questions?
My question goes back to the budget.
The answer is it depends, and you can talk with Jennifer, because some quasi-public agencies are subject to Local Government Budget Act, some are not. That was the question. I'm sorry. I did not repeat the question. So the question is the Local Government Budget Act applicable to quasi-public agencies? You have to know, and there are specific rules, and I don't have them in my head. But you can ask us for your particular one, and Jennifer and her legal team will be able to accept that. Okay, so the right answer is that the public portion of the quasi-public's money is subject to Local Government Budget Act.
So if we just work on grants, we don't really have any public funds because we work with 100% of grants, then that don't.
No, grants are public funds by definition.
Well, there you go. Thank you.
Grants are public funds by definition. Any more questions? We have any online questions? Go ahead, Karen.
For bank reconciliations, are there best practices on typical roles of who would prepare and who would review?
The basic thing is not necessarily, you just have to have the proper segregation of duties. So the person who prepares the bank rec and reviews the bank rec ought not be a signer, okay? If they are, have another set of eyes on it. So are there best practices for that? And it's basically just having the right segregation of duties to prepare that. So somebody in your office that is not a signer and is good to reconcile and review the bank rec. Okay? If you have an office that's that big, if you have that luxury to do that. If not, you definitely, like what does it say? 2 people for bank recs. Prepared by one, reviewed by another. You know, but who should do that? I mean, the person who's really an ace at bank recs. And a good thing to do with your ace at bank recs, because in our organization where I work with 8 accountants, we rotated it around to different accountants so they could understand the whole entire organization and learn how to do bank recs. All right, Barry, let's go on to...
Okay, now we're going to talk about non-payroll disbursements. Now, under this presentation of this section, we're going to talk about both the purchasing policies and procedures and your disbursement policies and procedures. So under the purchasing policies and procedures, they should address how purchases are initiated. That could include things like who is able to initiate a purchase, what documentation is required to be submitted in order to request that a purchase be made, and who approves those purchase requests. How vendors are added to the vendor list. Who approves additions to the vendor list? What information is required from the vendor in order to verify that the vendor is valid? Who actually performs the actual addition to the vendor list? The preparation and approval process of purchase requisitions and purchase orders. I kind of discussed that already under initiated. Controls to ensure compliance with the public bid law. Is there someone that is responsible for making sure that the public bid law is adhered to? Is there someone who makes sure that updates to the public bid law have been, or your organization is informed of those updates so that you continue to adhere to the public bid law? And finally, we say that you should document the documentation that the written policies and procedures should address documentation that is required to be maintained for all bids and price quotes. On to the disbursement policies and procedures. Very simply, it should address the processing, reviewing, and approving of disbursements. Now, disbursements is very important to have good written policies and procedures over those areas because that is money that is leaving your entity. So you want to make sure that you have well thought out and well written policies and procedures that your employees know how to follow to ensure that money is not going to non-business related places and that you're paying for valid purchases, valid and authorized purchases. Now all of these, your auditor is actually going to look and test each one of these, but all of these have to do with segregation of duties. And like Diane said, segregation of duties is very important because the intent is to prevent someone from committing a fraud and concealing the fraud. And if you look through each one of these, that's what is being discussed. Now, in particular, if you look at C, that one talks about vendor changes to vendor files. And if you look at the news, it's popping up more and more in the news lately that someone receives an email from what appears to be a valid vendor, and maybe they request a change to bank account information. That information is changed, money is sent to a fraudulent bank account. Now there's all kind of problems that occur as a result of that. So in some slides coming up, we're going to have some suggestions as to how to validate your any vendor changes that may be requested. Either the employee responsible for signing checks should mail the payment, or there should be an employee who is not responsible for processing payments. And then we say that only officials that are approved to sign checks should be the only people that are allowed to approve electronic disbursements of funds as well. Those people have basically, whether it's a paper check or an electronic disbursement of funds, it's the same thing. It's a way to pay. You're paying money. So the same people that are approved to, authorized to approve payments via check are the same people who should be authorized to approve electronic disbursement of funds. Disbursement amounts should match the related original invoice or receipt. You want to make sure that you're not overpaying for anything. And it's important to note that that receipt and invoice should be itemized. You should be able to look at that receipt and tell what was purchased, and it should have a description there that allows you to know that this is for a valid business purpose. Segregation of duties, again, your auditor is going to look to make sure that the segregation of duties that we discussed in the written policies and procedures are actually being implemented. They're going to test whether or not, and if they're not, that would be an exception. So make sure that whatever the segregation of duties is outlined in your written policies and procedures is actually being implemented. The non-payroll related electronic disbursements, again, should only be approved by authorized check signers. Why are they important? They're important because disbursements are money that is leaving your business, your organization. So you want to make sure you have the proper controls over money that is leaving your organization. You want disbursements to only be made to valid vendors for authorized purchases. You want to make sure that the purchases are for a valid business purpose. They're not for personal reasons. You want to make sure that it's a valid vendor. You're not sending money out to a fraudulent vendor where you could lose money. Again, changes to vendor files should be validated and substantiated. How do you do that? You can go to the Secretary of State's website and look at conduct a business filing search. You can also conduct a Google search and see what information is out there about this vendor. You can also contact you can call or contact an existing contact that you trust that is valid, that you have dealt with before, that may be at that vendor, to confirm that this is a legitimate email or a legitimate request. Segregation of duties, again, very important. You don't want one person committing a fraud and being able to conceal it. Effective controls over disbursements can help prevent fraud and misappropriation of funds, and management's review of transactions helps identify errors and unauthorized purchases. Tips for resolving non-payroll disbursement exceptions. A requisition process should take place before a purchase is made. If management has the opportunity to approve or reject a request for a purchase prior to a purchase being made, you can prevent the organization from being on the line for a payment that was not in line with what management wanted. Develop an authorized signers policy, which states who is authorized to sign checks and contracts and how many signatures are needed for a check. For instance, you may have 4 directors or 4 managers who all have the ability to sign a check, but it may not be necessary for all 4 to sign the check. You may only require 1 signature on a check, or you may require 2 signatures on a check, or you may have a dollar threshold in which you say anything above this dollar amount needs 2 signatures. So that's up to you and your organization as to how you want to do that, but you should have an authorized signers policy that specifies that. Efforts should be made to ensure the separation of incompatible duties. Again, segregation of duties are very important. And then it was mentioned earlier that we have a changing vendor banking information best practice on our website. So if you go to our website and go to that link, you will see that there are a number of suggestions that go even further into detail than what is contained in this presentation today as to how to protect yourself from becoming a victim of vendor change fraud. Taking it to the next level, develop a purchase requisition form, a standard form that allows employees to fill out the information. What is the business purpose of this purchase? How much will it cost? Who is the vendor? It should have a place where the employee can provide their signature and a place where their supervisor or manager can provide their signature, which shows that this purchase was approved. When requesting a change to information, require vendors to provide both old and new information. A valid vendor should be able to provide information that you already have on file. If they cannot provide that information, then that should raise red flags. If they cannot or refuse to provide that information, that should raise red flags for you. Management should provide written approval for every vendor change. So when you get that vendor change form, a member of management should review that change form before staff actually goes in and makes the change. Also, another thing that's not on the slide, but that is a good idea, is to not post the vendor change form on your website. Make them contact you, and you can send them a copy of the vendor change form. That allows you to know exactly who has a copy who has a valid copy of your vendor change request form. So if company A requests the form, you send it to company A, you would not expect to receive a vendor change form from company B. And it lets you realize, it helps you gain confidence that this is a valid form if you know exactly who you sent it to. Also, as Diane said, we like our software. So there is something called procure to pay software, which can pretty much automate your entire purchasing and dispersing process. You can, some of this software allows you to make a request, have it electronically authorized by management. It does a three-way match between the purchase order, receiving report, and invoice. You can capture all of the supporting documentation and store it. So everything is in one space, and payments can even be made from some of these softwares for any purchases that have been made. Now, statewide agreed upon procedure 6 is credit, debit. Oh, okay.
We're good.
Okay. Credit, debit, fuel, and purchase cards. So written policies and procedures should address how cards are controlled, allowable business uses, documentation requirements, required approvers of statements, and monitoring card usage. Each statement and the accompanying receipt should be reviewed and approved in writing by someone other than the cardholder. Obviously, you do not want someone to make a purchase with a credit card and approve their own purchase. That is obviously not a good idea. No finance fee. Your auditor is going to check to make sure there are no finance fees or late charges. It's an inefficient use of taxpayer money to incur late charges and penalties. You want to make sure that every month you pay that bill in full so that you can not avoid those types of penalties and fees. That money can be spent providing services to your taxpayer, to your constituents, versus paying an unnecessary fee. The original itemized receipts that identify what is purchased should be included with the bank statement. So the person that's reviewing the bank statement should be able to compare the charges on the bank statement to the itemized receipt to verify that what was purchased is actually a valid purchase for a business purpose. The business purpose should be documented for each transaction. The names of the individuals participating in meals should be documented. That is a good idea so that the person can look and say, all right, they're not paying for meals for their family members or friends. This is for a legitimate business purpose. Why is this important? To reduce the chances of both intentional and unintentional misuse of credit cards. Incurring late fees and finance charges are inefficient use of taxpayer funds. Prior authorization of purchases helps ensure that they are necessary for a valid business purpose, and management's review of transactions helps identify errors in unauthorized purchases. Tips for resolving credit and debit card purchase exceptions. A board member should review and approve the card purchases made by management. So if you have a CEO, a mayor, whoever, if they make a purchase on a credit card, it's a good idea to have a board member approve theirs, so they're not the ones approving their purchases or having a subordinate sign off on it who may feel that there's some sort of pressure to sign off on it for their boss. Have a board member involved in the process. Statements should be paid in full in a timely manner. Management should have written procedures for missing reports. That could include receipts. That could include a missing receipt statement, which an employee would be required to fill out, stating as to the reason why there is a missing receipt. Some entities also, some businesses, they allow you to do a receipt search on their website. So some, not all, I don't know how common it is, but there are some retailers that will allow you to go to their website and enter the date of the purchase, the dollar amount, the last 4 digits of the card used, and information like that, and it will actually pull up a digital copy of the receipt, and you can use that as as the receipt that's missing. Cards should not be used to circumvent the public bid law. Don't use your credit card for recurring purchases. Do not break up a purchase into several transactions in order to skirt the public bid law. Taking it to the next level, conduct a periodic review of your credit cards. If there are credit cards, I've been out to places before where you ask for a list of credit cards, then they hand you a stack of credit cards and they don't match. And there's credit cards in that stack of credit cards that they did not realize were still active or didn't even realize they had. They may have used it one time and never used it again. Those types of credit cards should be closed. Maintain a master list of credit cards, or you can use your issuer's online portal if it contains all the relevant information, such as who the card is assigned to, what the spending limit is, et cetera, et cetera. Require employees to sign an annual credit card agreement. Employees should know what their responsibility is as far as having the ability to use a government-issued credit card. They need to understand that there is a penalty, including up into termination if they misuse the credit card. And store unused cards in a locked location under the control of custodian. That may not be practical for everyone, but it is a good idea if you have several cards to keep it under lock and key with a custodian who employees, management, whoever has to go to request the card. They have to sign a paper saying that they have gotten that card, so that that custodian knows who has the card, what it's being used for, and the custodian will not release that card unless they have the proper approvals from management prior to that request that the card be removed from their custody.
All right, so we're going to go fast because we have about 15 minutes left, but some of the policies are really fast. Travel and travel-related expense reimbursements, these are the kinds of things that your policies and procedures need to address. Allowable expenses, because for some who travel, there should be a lot of unallowable expenses paid with public funds. The dollar thresholds, and what is that? Like per diem rates. If you're paying on a per diem rate for things, or if you're not, then the actual cost that you're willing to pay for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and lodging and things like that, the documentation and the required approvers. And no matter who's traveling, we don't care. There needs to be a required approver, right? So you can be reimbursed on a per diem or actual. If you're reimbursed on a per diem rate, the correct per diem rate, state or federal guidelines. Okay, why? Because those are reasonable. Those are reasonable. Every time you travel, it doesn't matter who you are, you don't need to stay at the Ritz-Carlton, okay? You need to travel reasonable with public funds. If it's at actual cost, then you're going to want original itemized receipt. Not the receipt that says the total on the credit card was $42.97. That doesn't work. It doesn't say what you bought. You need the itemized receipt. You need the public purpose. Often that is like a conference brochure or things like that, and it needs to be reviewed and approved by people. So why? Obviously, this is a place where people pad expense reports to get more in public funds. So you need to really, really watch this and look at that strong thing. You need a strong business purpose for your travel. You need complete documentation, and your travel needs to be economical and reasonable. So here's how it goes. What the government will pay should be economical and reasonable, right? But should you want to go into first class because you're a big guy and you're not real comfortable in those other seats, you can travel first class, but the government will reimburse the reasonable rate at business travel. Okay, so that's what we're saying. How many bags are reasonable to check in? There's a lot of things here to do that, to have that for. And basically, manage your budget and make sure things are reasonable. Avoid being on the front page of the paper. Okay, this makes nasty, nasty stuff for that. So tips, update your policy. Find out what's going on. I remember when rideshare stuff came in, we had to update our policy on things like that. Okay, those per diem rates, take a look. Those are links to both the federal and the state rates, and check because they get updated frequently. And then use checklists and forms and all that stuff and make them turn in their travel within a reasonable amount of time at the end of travel. A year is not reasonable. 2 months is not reasonable in my book. 30 days, that's what's reasonable. And then the big thing about travel and taking it to the next level is just details in your policy and having and having very strong policies that people know about. Lots and lots and lots of details in your policy. And every time something new happens, you change your policy for that kind of stuff. Okay? Meals and overnight stays. Are you going to have a meal where you don't have an overnight stay? Doesn't sound too reasonable to me. Excessive expenses, not be reimbursed. Snacks not reimbursed. I could do a whole hour just on abusive travel that I've seen in my career, and some other things. So that's basically how you take it to the next level. Consider putting some really, really fine details in your travel policy about these kinds of things, especially for tips. So what I did for you guys, because I really like you guys, is I went and did your research for you on what are reasonable tips, because I had to update this, okay, from older slides that I had. So these are reasonable tips for reasonable things, but in your policy, you're going to want to say, do we really need to tip a maitre d' or a concierge? I mean, this is public funds, really? Okay, so put those kinds of things in your policy. So because we have a few minutes, hold your questions. Barry and I are going to stick around, okay, and we're going to move right on to contracts.
This is what should be included in your written policies and procedures. Because we're short on time, I'll let you read that yourselves, but those are the things that will be tested when your auditor checks to see if your written policies and procedures address everything. Contracts should be bid in accordance with public bid law. The contract should be approved by the board or in a manner consistent with your policy. Contract amendments should be made within the scope of the original contract. Invoices and related payments should agree to the terms and conditions of the contract. Contracts make clear who's responsible for what, unless both parties know what their responsibility is so that they can fulfill that responsibility and hopefully they can avoid litigation. A legal review of contracts is very important. It can identify risks that are associated with the contract. It can ensure compliance with applicable laws and protect the entity's interests. Adhering to your policies, if your policies are well written and well thought out, they should align with what the law requires, and if you consistently follow those written policies and procedures, that can keep you out of non-compliance with the various laws that may apply to your entity. Tips for resolving contract exceptions. It's important to be familiar and comply with the public bid law. You've heard that a lot today. Have a legal review performed before entering a new contract or modifying an existing contract. Develop a process to monitor the contractor's performance against the contract requirements and make sure that you fulfill your contractual obligations. Taking it to the next level, our legal staff has put together a really helpful FAQ regarding public bid law. That's the link to it, and it's very helpful. I go to it all the time whenever I get questions. Consider using governmental contract management software. Again, software is very useful. It can help streamline a lot of your administrative processes and help improve efficiency.
All right, payroll. Payroll is kind of easy, and this is what the statewide AUPs are focusing on. They're focusing on authorized pay rates, and they're focusing on leave and on attendance, okay? Those three things. So authorized pay rates is the first thing. So we do have to have these things addressed. Reviewing and approving time records, yes. So what you're seeing here in internal controls, Over and over again, what are we saying? Written policies and procedures, review, segregation of duties, proper approvals, documentation. It's all the same thing, whether we're talking about credit cards, contracts, payroll disbursements, travel, whatever we're talking about. It's all the same kind of thing here. And so what you want to know, you definitely want time sheets approved before they're paid and attendance. So here's how it goes. If you earn leave, okay, you need to document your attendance. How do we know if you've earned leave if we don't know if you were here? So you need to document your attendance, whatever that looks like for that. Pay rate needs to be authorized, however it is in your organization that it's authorized, in the personnel file. When Barry gets a promotion, a new pay rate authorized in the personnel file for everybody, okay? Timesheets need to be approved by a supervisor, someone who can say, yes, they worked. Yes, they did that work. Yes, they were here those days. Termination payments. These can be really complex because not all of our employees are very nice and neat, and their last day is the last day of the pay period. So we have to calculate that, and then we have to calculate any earned but unused paid time off that they get. Be transparent with the calculations. Follow the policies for that. Leave records need to be, when you earn it, you add it to your record, and when you take it, you deduct it from your leave balance, okay, for that. So that's basically what all of those are, and why we just need our employees need to understand how they get paid, and we need to do everything properly because after all, it is with public funds. So basically, how do we do this? We have that formal approval, we have that supervisor's approval. A lot of this can be done automatically through workflow processes in there. Checklist helps make sure you have all the right documentations. Another thing is pay all your third parties on their pay dates. I realize that some people don't know when taxes are due. So these are the due dates for federal tax payments and for the Louisiana tax payments and the reporting for that, okay? And pay everything timely. Pay your third parties timely. Guess what? It's not your money, it's theirs. Okay, so that's just the big important thing. It's the same kind of thing. Have a good hiring process for that. Checklists work wonders to make sure that you've got all the documentation at the right level. Do not advance leave before it's due. Segregate those incompatible duties and check that computer access, especially in payroll. Payroll is PII. There's a lot of PII. Not everybody needs access to that. And just make sure that everything is documented, approved, goes through, authorized, and all of those kinds of things. So Barry, tell us about ethics.
These are the things that should be included in your ethics policy, including prohibitions, actions. Can you hear me now? Okay. Written policies and procedures should address the prohibitions that's defined by the law. It should include things as far as the penalty if actions that will be taken if violations occur, systems to monitor for possible ethics violations, and requirements that documentation is maintained to demonstrate that all employees and officials have been notified of any changes to the ethics policy. Each employee is required by the law to complete 1 hour of ethics training annually. All employees and officials should be notified of any changes to the ethics policy, and every entity should appoint an ethics designee who will be the contact person for the ethics board. This law lists all the prohibited actions, and if you go to the ethics board's website, they actually have a summary of all the prohibited actions that would apply to you guys. The law requires the ethics training and ethics designee appointment. The effective ethics policy promotes transparency, prevents conflicts of interest, and helps maintain the public's trust. Tips for resolving ethics exceptions: notify employees of any changes to your policy, appoint the ethics designee as required by the law, ensure that employees and officials are taking their ethics training as required by the law, and that training is available free online if you go to the ethics board's website, which is listed here. Regularly review and update your ethics policy to ensure that it reflects any changes made to the laws and regulations. Taking it to the next level, require that all employees take their annual training before January 31st of every year, and any new hires have them complete their training within 30 days of hiring. management should promote an ethical tone at the top. Employees are likely to follow the lead of their top management. If they set an ethical tone at the top, they are likely to imitate that ethical behavior. And you can see that the LLA's legal staff has also put together a required training white paper that lists all of the required training that public officials must take. Debt service, this procedure, these are the written policies and procedures. They should address all of these items listed here. The most important thing to remember about this procedure is that you must obtain approval from the State Board of Bond Commission regarding any debt that you want to incur. The government should comply with all debt covenants as listed in your debt covenants. Why is it important? It's required by the law, and adhering to your debt covenants, it helps you maintain access to credit, avoid default, and protect your financial health and build trust with your stakeholders. Tips for resolving: monitor your entity's debt levels to ensure they are sustainable, actively maintain compliance, and get approval from the State Bond Commission prior to issuing any debt. Taking it to the next level, you can consider using debt management software and make your debt payments before they're due. Therefore, if anything unexpected pops up, such as natural disasters, electronic outages, whatever, you are able to make that payment on time. And frequently consult with your bond counsel to ensure compliance with all legal requirements. The fraud notice, that was kind of discussed this morning. You were introduced to it in the first presentation. You must report all misappropriations to the Legislative Auditor's Office and to the District Attorney in writing. And you must post the fraud notice on the premises and on your website. Tips: just post it and report any misappropriations to LLA and to the DA. Tips for resolving the fraud notice: all instances should be reported. The fraud notice must be posted. Again, that is on our website. The notice is posted on our website along with the web buttons, and the notice is in multiple languages, so you can print that out and post it as necessary. Taking it to the next level, if your entity has multiple buildings, post it in every building. If your entity has multiple floors with multiple common areas, such as a break room on every floor, post it in every break room.
All right, we're going to go real fast through this because Les did a great job, but hopefully none of us see this on our computers where we've been hacked. And what is the main thing we're trying to do with this one? The main thing we're trying to do with this one, you identify your critical data, you back up your critical data, and you don't back it up on the network, okay? Because they can go out, like Les talked about, and go get all your backups on the network, and things lie there dormant like until the 4th of July, virus and things like that. Make sure that you have antivirus software. It's current, it's active. Make sure that the software you're using is currently supported by your vendor and not old and outdated, and your vendor's not paying attention to it. Why? Because there are holes in your software, and if you're not patching it, the fraudsters can get through, and that's what we want you to do. So basically this one, we're focusing very heavily on this. Back up at least weekly. For some of us, that's way too long. Some want to back up hourly and things like that, but we're checking. At least it's backed up weekly. Can I tell you, it's not enough to just back up. You need to test and verify that it can be restored for those things. So why? Because the cyber attackers are out there. It's not if you're going to get attacked again. It's not if you're going to get attacked. It's when. It's just coming. We can be the best that we can be, but they're trying all the time for that, and we need to be ready for that. Act 155 says that you need cybersecurity training, okay? Everybody it came out in 2020 when we were all like trying to deal with COVID. So we need to have cybersecurity training, all employed. This is not annual. This is one time, new hires within 30 days on those kinds of things. I want to make you aware of that because I think that's going to be a future statewide AUP for that. So tips for resolving: just follow the procedures. Just do what the procedures say and make sure that you have these things going on. And then taking it to the next level, Les talked about that multi-factor authentication. The biggest thing with cyber attacks is the human factor. Don't click on that email. He taught us how to identify that this morning, so we can go look at that. And those strong passwords that he talked about. Physical access, limiting that to the server room, and administrator privileges, reducing that. All right.
The final SAUP, prevention of sexual harassment. The written policies and procedures should address the requirements of the law, including agency responsibilities and prohibitions, annual employee training, and the annual reporting. All employees must complete 1 hour of annual training. Supervisors must have additional training, and that training can be found on the Civil Services website. If you do go to the Civil Services website to take that training, you will have to fill out a request form in order to access the actual training. The policy and complaint procedures should be posted on the website or premises if you do not have a website. And I think the law says that it should be in a conspicuous location. I have received that question before, and what is a conspicuous location? It's a place that is easily visible. The annual report must be completed by February 1st. It should include all of these items: number of and percentage of public servants who completed the training, number of sexual harassment complaints, number of complaints which resulted in a finding of sexual harassment, number of complaints which resulted in discipline or corrective action, amount of time it took to resolve each complaint. Local governments do not have to submit that report to anyone, but they should maintain the document, store it, keep it on file, because it is subject to public records requests, and your auditor will be looking for it when they perform this procedure. LLA's prevention of sexual harassment law legal FAQs includes a template that you can use when developing your annual report. Why is it important? The law requires it, and by providing this training and having a policy on the prevention of sexual harassment, it helps protect employees, encourages equality in the workplace, and helps create a positive workplace environment. Tips for resolving the exceptions: require all employees to take the training by January 31st, new hires within the first 30 days. Post the policy and complaint procedures in the same location as your fraud notice. There, everybody can see exactly, they can see all of it at one time. Post policy and complaint procedures on both your website and on your premises. And management should sign and date the annual report to provide evidence that it was actually completed prior to February 1st. Taking it to the next level, consider placing a link to your annual report on your entity's website. That encourages transparency, so that anyone who may be interested, they can go directly to your website and locate this information, and promote a zero tolerance tone at the top. Again, it's just like the ethical tone at the top. If management sets the proper, lets employees know that there are consequences for improper behavior, then people are less likely to take part in that type of behavior.
All right, we're going to close it out. It's the end, and this is what you want to know. What's the future of statewide AUPs? What are we thinking at the Legislative Auditor's Office about this? Every procedure, every year. That's just how it's going to go. We're going to keep the fraudsters on their toes, okay? The exact procedures could change. What's Diane thinking at the moment? This is what we're thinking. That cybersecurity training is really, really, really important. While we were here today, one of our local governments got hacked. Okay, so some people are dealing with that while we were here today. It happens. It happens. So it's very, very important to have that. A new thing that we started doing is collecting data on this. So what that means is now when your auditor uploads your report, they're going to tell us if there are exceptions in these procedures. We're going to start tracking that, and we're going to target some resources to help you resolve those things. And we are going to go to fiscal years beginning instead of ending, so that way we can have a lot of lead time and more flexibility when we make those changes. All right, so right now I want to thank you so much for your time and attention to our conference. We have enjoyed hosting you. We hope that it's been really good for you. You will get your CPE certificates by probably within a month, maybe less than that. For that, we'll be sending those out based on our attendance. Our next CLGE program, I know y'all can't wait. I wish I had a date, but I'm not that fast. I don't have a date. So we're looking at October, November. We pick it. We look at what other conferences are, and we try not to conflict with any other conferences, and we pick those dates for you. We hope to offer intermediate governmental accounting. You had basic this time. We're going to offer intermediate there. And we want to thank so many of the people who made this possible. Liz out there, who knows each one of you, likes your children, took good care of you, lunch, all that stuff, registering, answering all your, she's phenomenal. And you know who else? Our IT team. Our IT team has to build all of this background for you to register and post everything. We will be posting those videos. So you know what? You are armed with knowledge. Now go forth and conquer.